Hey, I'm totally not an AI generated image, but hey, I'm crazy. And this is Pile Up Above the Clouds, done by Remove Studios, or which, according to Steam, says they are a high school based or high schoolers based in out of Turkey who just want to simply create a game. This essentially is just, how do I explain it? It's basically like Tetris, but like with more of like a stylized decision to it. There's a bunch of resource managements and whatnot, and I already played a little bit, and I really do enjoy this game. Keep in mind, this game is actually still in early access, so there will be issues and all that kind of stuff. So obviously, people are gonna have issues with certain aspects, but nonetheless, it is a completely fine game and fairly relaxing. Kind of reminds me of Dwarf Romantic, which it was also a nice puzzle, simple, relaxing kind of dealio game. So let's go ahead and get started. Here you can select new land, you can select the type of mode, sandbox or regular. We're going to go regular because that's the default gameplay. But sandbox, you can essentially create your own kind of dealio. You can also unlock more than one maps to essentially get a different starting point. We're going to be starting with Red Clan, but there is currently 3 maps. One involves an aerial view, which I have not unlocked. There is Farland Mountain, which I have unlocked, but it does get a little bit more difficult, but you can essentially just earn more of that kind of stuff. Yeah, you can also name it whatever. I'm going to leave it the default. And here we get started on our humble little land stack area. Essentially, up here is the progress goal that you want to get started and reach to. So you want to reach up to 5,000 to earn some scrap, which can be used to later on unlock upgrades and whatnot. So here you can see I have several different pieces that I can use. I need to use 4 of these cards, which essentially you can just select them each. But yeah, you get these little places. You can see a little like mat. You can line them up and all that. Scroll wheel to zoom in and out, to switch the rotation and all that, R to rotate, and all that. You can also use WASD to move, W to move up, S to move down, A and D to move left and right respectively, and then Q and E to switch, but you can also just click on these. Yeah, essentially, you can see like the point of origin, so this will be preferred point, so if I were to rotate, it rotates on that point of axis. So, and you can also see here is the number of citizens, or the number of like points that you'll get to essentially unlock. You basically want to match them up. So here I have 45. It will count towards the total score. So realistically, you want to try and aim for that 5,000. You're not going to get on the first time, but it will keep going. So when you first place down a building here, you get to see essentially just what it looks like, or basically it will just start auto generating and randomly generating via like just procedurally in a way, if that makes sense, of different buildings and styles. You can also use your middle mouse button to essentially just move the pivot point / camera. You can also just keep stacking them in like wacky combinations too. So for example, instead of just placing it here, I can place one right up here and basically keep just stacking it like a long way, so where you can just go like so, and it will just keep generating pillars and just create a bunch of interesting, unique structures that are out there. But normally I like to place all my personal pieces towards the edge, but you can kind of see it's like just generating, or just generating like pieces there. So if I were to place this, for example, I'm going to place this small. Also, these devs like to add a little bit like memery here and there, which is nice, but small house. So if I were to place it right here, the pipes are, it would kind of try and like regenerate and load essentially to create like almost a newer structure. It kind of reminds me of like those houses that you see in Italy, especially over near around Venice with the like colored houses. It's essentially just that kind of stuff. Well, not that kind of stuff, but essentially, you know what I'm talking about, like just the very colorful but like very unique and interesting looking buildings. So essentially, you got to place down all of them. There are some like pieces to tell you like, hey, you need to do that, but essentially you get several free turns, and every so often or somewhat uncommonly, you'll get these factories which will generate specific type of resources / materials. So currently all these were classified as housing resources. So it will be like a house factory, a support factory, as well as a requirement factory. For example, a requirement factory will generate requirement buildings, which requirements aren't really a requirement, quote unquote. It's essentially just a type of building with like specialty resources slash specialty items that, or buildings, I should say, that kind of provide like a unique benefits or like costly like a random different, either like both a positive and a negative, like a double-edged sword in a way. While a support factory will generate support stuff, generally is more helpful, and then house factories will generate these populace that you can kind of see. Oh yeah, and also in addition, you could use the control key to essentially like have a top-down view. So in case you're having trouble to place in a block, you can just simply place it down. But you can also do the same thing with factories, rotate them. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna place mine on the edge because these are often not entirely huge, but they are often useful. But yeah, we're just gonna go place them down, get all three of those immediately done. I just normally separate it because it's somewhat easier that way. Essentially, I was gonna hit spacebar to advance a turn. And in here you can see I have these three different pieces. I got one from the house factory. Down here you can kind of see like, oh hey, this has been approximately 1 day. This is how much time I have spent. There is the citizen happiness level. You want to keep these guys fairly happy, otherwise you'll just get like a loss or like they become depressed. But essentially you can have different ones. Home officers are off. There is also large homes and home offices. Those often have like large populations, which are nice to at least have to keep those points up. Essentially this is how you earn your points in this game. There is also these, for example, this says it is platform. It is a support classified under support, and you cannot break physics rules if you wrote them. It basically says this one cannot be destroyed, like regardless, as it is listed as a solid, while this one is listed as a park, which basically will just provide the needed range of nature, which there, if you see right here, there is a power, like a lightning, and then like almost a red silhouette, which it's not fully clear. Yeah, like a gas silhouette. It's a little bit hard to see, which if they made a little. But essentially that means that the citizens would like to have power at this location, and they would like to have gas here as well. You can pet the whale too, yay. They'll just keep petting the whale and they'll be happy. Essentially that's what they require, and the park in itself is basically required. As you can see, it has like a nature kind of thing, which means hey, it needs nature like aspects. So visibly, like the red areas you cannot place, but the white you can. It's the simple thing. But normally these park areas are large enough that they can take up quite a lot of roof space. So you usually want to like plan strategically to essentially place your like pieces and whatnot. Normally I like to just dump them elsewhere unless I specifically need them later on. And for example, these platforms, you can only place them towards like the edges, but I normally place them at least somewhat close by or somewhere around that I could at least later on place like another very important little kind of piece that comes later on from the support factory, I believe. Essentially, you can see if you go here to the settings, cogs, you can see this is the amount of factories that you can. All that, you don't get a piece per turn, but essentially these will tell you like, hey, these are the amount that will be generated, and these are the amount of terms or they have to do before you essentially get one. There is action stock, which have a turn specific thing, requirement stocks for upcoming turns and all that kind of stuff. For example, here we got an electric generator. This one has the requirement of providing the need of electricity in its range, igniting, and then quote danger. Danger in this building triggers some explosives. So basically, here you see a radius of like red and lightning. You basically don't want to get that like little igniting area. It'll come back later, but essentially here they're all happy now, and here is the happiness. The more people that you keep adding, the like higher the happiness will get. So you want to keep that relatively high, and I believe it caps out to like 80% that before they become critical, or before you have a few turns before you're like, hey, you have only a few turns before you just straight up lose. Just kind of fit it in there, and it'll just get stuff. So right here is that little park green emblem, which I normally save those till like a little bit later, just because the park covers a wider area, but the park is huge and it's a roof tile, and there are certain tiles, for example, roof here, you can't place anything over the top of it. So essentially here is the like more important one. This one's called leaking in danger. Basically, the building will destroy whatever that is below it, and excluding the same building or solid ones. So essentially, there is the reason why I placed on this platform is because it's listed as a solid. So leaking means it will destroy anything that's placed down below, which means if I were to place it right here, it would destroy both of those, thus creating a permanently dead, or quote unquote permanently dead amount of citizens, and then just bringing down the overall happiness, which I can show it later on. But essentially, I'm going to place it right here just to cover the maximum amount of area, and also to provide like basically future proofing in another way too. And you can also place more buildings and all that kind of stuff. These will continuously do the same thing unless they're like destroyed later on. Yeah, essentially you just pile them up. That one had water, it immediately became a happiness, so it's building up to the top here. And you want to just try to manage and strategize as much as possible to essentially maximize the amount. So for example, this here is a gas tank. It will basically explode near anything that involves electricity. So if I were to place it here, there is a red building which thus will explode a lot of stuff in a quite a little bit large radius. So you don't really want to place it too close, otherwise we'll just say, hey, you're placing it too close, you're gonna explode and you're gonna kill a lot of like citizens for the lulz kind of way. So I'm gonna just place it right here. It's close enough to cover all that, and it basically provided happiness to all those. Here is a garden house, and most of these houses are often just random. There's a three, well, I like to say like a 3x3, a 2x, like a 1x1, 2x2. There's also I think it was like a 3x7. But yeah, there's many different buildings with different sizes, but you kind of have to like puzzle piece fit them all that way. Yeah, like I said, I keep them separated. That's just my personal preference. Most of these are often just like the same height regardless. For example, this one is a production line. So this one is both a solid and then all that, which will provide like support if I happen to get another water canister right there, or like another water tank. Such that this is just like an edge kind of thing, but it will provide more factory / just support later on. So it will produce basically, yeah, it's basically double it. So like if I need more things faster, then it will just produce it faster essentially. There is also other specialty buildings that are what I think are pretty powerful and pretty essential, but usually it can be used, which I usually use it recklessly, but it's kind of fun just to do it that way. Like I said, you can actually kind of notice that it just changes, like the building itself just changes every so often, just kind of like the morph in shape to essentially create like almost like a large pillar structure kind of dealio. This one, for example, is a big house. It's just a big old house. I can keep just stacking them on, creating a almost like unique, basically just, this one is so useful later on too, but unfortunately it cannot be placed over gardens. It can only be placed over roof tiles, which roof tiles we don't have any, but essentially also counts as a solid too, which is nice, but we can't place it over because it's a roof tile and we don't have roof tiles. But it is a skippable extra, and extras basically mean, hey, you can skip. And then we are now officially the stackville. Essentially, yeah. So once you rank up and get that, you essentially get picked between two different locations. For example, this is this one I believe it gives me like a Wi-Fi signal. But essentially this one will be, basically this one will just give me a like wireless satellite, while this one will give me like a trash compactor, which will basically lets me pass around if I have an item. But I'm going to just pick this one for the heck of it because it has a little bit more chance and randomness. And then here is action factories, which lets you craft unique and risky buildings. So for example, here is a tent. Basically, it will collect populations and then just generate a skyscraper once it's destroyed. So this is useful if you build up a lot of stuff and you just want to simply destroy a lot of stuff. I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. And then there's also industry, which can generate a factory lane, and there is storage, which gives a random requirement block, as well as random as well as some brick roofs, which that's what I was talking about with the terrace. The brick roofs are basically roofs. You can't place anything on top of it. Technically, you can. You just kind of have to like put more houses over it. Casinos, which will be either a curse or a blessing, depending on which one it is. But we'll just go ahead and pick this one because those two are the same. Essentially, you get both of those. Internet satellite. We're gonna place this. Let's give the apartment complexes some satellite internet. Here is the action factory. You also get like more house factories too. Yeah, essentially you can just keep piling them up. It doesn't matter regardless. And it doesn't have to be the full on, especially with these like specialty buildings that are like, hey, place this on top of this. You just have to touch a small bit of it, or at least just a little bit part of the building to get touching it to essentially acquire the benefits of it. So that one, these will start producing a little bit more commonly, just more homes and more offices for me to continually to pile them up. So here we're going to go ahead and get started with the tent. So if I were to place it right here, which is covering quite a large radius, but I don't want to destroy that water freaking thing because that is annoying. So I'm going to go and place that right here while providing that gas tank I'm placing right here to essentially, I'm purposely exploding this just to show you. Boom. And that is basically what happens if you essentially just do something. But yeah, essentially it will take that all it just takes the portion, but it's a 342, double the population of the pets collect. So it's not always fully guaranteed, but it usually does generate quite a lot of tenants too, but it's fairly risky too. So, and this one is a fragile support, which basically I would have to just create like a temporary platform. Let's just create it down here, and then I'm just gonna put the casino here because that technically will provide 100 population, but it's gonna roll right now. Kind of mid. It gives me a moai, which is like also the second like memory of this game. Yeah, we're gonna reach another one. It doesn't give me a choice. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time, water tanks. Now that was what I needed desperately, just to hopefully bring it up. But I don't have any of the power stuff that is up here and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, I can kind of sacrifice one of these. I'm not gonna fully sacrifice that, but I get some support parts which are nice to at least have. I'm essentially just going to place these all around the place just to have and make sure. And by the way, this entire base platform technically counts as sturdy as well, so if there's any issues, you can just place them there. I will be losing in 2 turns as long as I can get a park. And we rank up to Stack Town. And like I said, it's fairly simple. I unlocked quite a lot of stuff after playing. This one, it will just basically generate a building. Basically, this is just a lab, like more Wi-Fi, and then there is just Judge, which will, or a courthouse, I believe this is called. But essentially, this one will just generate a jail for every basically buildings you play this turn. But though, in order to, it's going to select that, and in here, we can go and select mechanic, which I do prefer the mechanic. There is also slums, which will just continuously give itself more and more and more whenever it just gets destroyed. So it's fairly useful for just creating like a mass amount of, I guess just a mass amount of like, but you will like destroy happiness, etc. I'm gonna just place down another house factory because why not? As well as a requirement factory. Mind you, you can stack on top of these like chimneys too, which they will just lab. So essentially here is mechanic, which is probably one of my more favorite ones, but essentially it gives 5 buildings from themselves and then it gets drained, which basically means, hey, you place it, they will no longer be creating any additional stuff, but you'll get 5 different separate little like basically mechanics. I'm gonna place them right here, just get a lot of stuff to then just start going ham on. But we're going to get the industry, which will generate a factoring. Basically, this will be useful for just, I actually never gotten this, so I don't know how it fully works, but we're just going to place it right there. And then really that's kind of the thing, like you can technically generate a lot of that happiness once you just keep getting buildings and piling them up, hence pile them. hence pile up. You just generally just gotta make sure they're happy. But we just won this game. Essentially, we got Stack City. Can either go into free mode or back to menu, but I'm gonna hit end of LAN. Back to menu is what I'm gonna hit. Essentially, when you finish, you get some scraps, which you can use to buy upgrades and view the various buildings that are essentially here. Yeah, that was essentially pile up above the clouds. And I'm crazy, leaving out becoming more of an AI generated person. Peace.